Hey, I'm Lurpus. I played Counter-Strike for a living for 8 years. I've been on the desk for some of the biggest events for 5 years. I know nothing about Counter-Strike, but then again, neither does Thorin. Welcome to his YouTube channel.
Mad Lions are the former Tricked lineup, notably headed by Hunden, veteran in-game leader of both Source and CSGO. It's his best lineup that he's ever had thus far, so it's actually quite exciting in that sense. If you don't know his career story, he has basically touched or been involved with the story of so much Danish talent coming through. I actually did an interview with him about it. So many names throughout the last 4 to 5 years that you would recognise that he played with. Most of the great players, basically. But his problem was he was bottom of the hierarchy, the pecking order of the in-game leaders in Denmark, and so he would find someone and then he would essentially have to pass them to another team above him as they took his players. So this is one of the rare chances where he's gotten a whole bunch of those players quite early, and at the moment it looks like he's going to get to hang on to them. He's not going to have to just pass them off to an MSL or a Snappy and see those guys maybe credited for developing those players, putting them in the right roles, etc. Now this particular 5-man lineup, especially because they did play as Tricked at the end of last year, have had 36 maps of play on LAN, so they've actually gotten a decent amount of LAN play in. Admittedly, those are all tier 2 LANs, they're DreamHack Opens, etc, etc. They've been to 5 LANs to cover that span, and actually 4 in the last 2.5 months. So they've been very active. They're not a team that took much time off, so potentially if they can get to a big tournament, which obviously didn't manage to make it to the Masters tournament after this recent Leipzig DreamHack Open, they actually potentially will be a team that won't have to cycle up. They'll already be in some kind of form. They've been very active. So if you go back in time to, I think it was October, they played at that V4 Future Sports Festival where they actually won the tournament. That was when they were Tricked. And it's not like they avoided the good teams. Mouse Sports, the team that right after that basically went, a couple of tournaments later, went Hypernova and became one of the best teams in the whole world. They beat them, they lost to them in the group stage in a 3-map series, but it was very close, hence why my brain told me they'd beaten them there. Like the third map was an overtime session. Then in the semi-finals, they played MIBR. You can laugh all you want. Yes, MIBR is not a very good team. They're not a top 10 team, but they have players and they have a core of talent, especially at that point in time, that you would expect to beat the likes of Tricked, right? No. Actually, the Trick team 2-0'd MIBR, and yes, another close series, but a series that they won, and so they won that tournament. Then you go to a tournament called the We Play Forge of Masters Season 2, which was mainly teams you won't know, but in the final, they lost, they came second place. They lost to Godsend of Makaleli, and it's actually a very mixed roster. They have that guy Zen from Finland, if you remember. So, okay, not that great a result overall, and then again, not that great teams there, but some more LAN experience. Then they went to DreamHack Open Winter towards the end of the year. They came second place again. This time, they lost to Forza. Should probably call them Fours to be fair, it was a 3-map series again, so you can see they're always contesting these teams, they're not going down easy. And if you've seen Fours, right after that basically was when Fours did their pretty decent run to the playoffs in Epicenter, where they actually beat the Exavanga and Alvirtus Pro lineup. So Fours is no joke. They have a pretty solid map pool. They have a nice enough T-side. They have a couple of good players. So I consider that a decent enough result, even though you lost it. Then you come to DreamHack Open Sevilla, which was their last tournament of 2020. They made top 4. They made it to the semi-finals. So they're playoffs in every tournament. And it was another close loss. They lost to North 3 maps in the semi-finals. And this was a close series, and it's worth adding, this was one of those series where Kirby had a big performance, which obviously hasn't happened that much, except if you go back to maybe the Major and the odd series here and there. So, in theory, Kirby on paper is supposed to be better than everyone on, they were now the Mad Lions team already. So again, not an appalling result. Yes, you want to see more, you want to see them develop to become a top team, but these are the steps, these are the growing pains that you go through. Then you come to DreamHack Open Leipzig, which was literally over the weekend. They only made top 4 there. They made it to the semi-finals. They lost to Renegades in a 3-map series. Obviously, Renegades, I actually think, looked in inspired form since getting rid of Dick Stacey. Dexter, if Tabson hadn't won the tournament with Big, I think Dexter almost certainly would have been the MVP of the tournament. In fact, he might have still been if he'd just gone off a little bit more in the finals. So, certainly no shame in that, but again, it shows that in playoff series play, there's a little bit to be desired perhaps, because actually Mad Lions Tricked, they 2-0 the bloody groups when it's the DreamHack Open format, which still has the best of ones for the winners portion of the groups. It's so often, it's ridiculous. So you can see that preparation's there, the roles are there, the tactics are there, execution's there, but then we're talking about things that come in that are intangibles when you're in semi-final and final. Nerves, pressure, another guy going off who's experienced and you don't know how to match him, or you're having a bad game and you don't know how to claw yourself out of it in the way that great players, obviously the Astralises of the world, are able to. So they clearly have some inexperience when it comes to winning finals. The only final they won out of the 3 that they played in was against the Polish Virtus.pro lineup, which basically immediately got cut right after that almost. So there's still something to be worked on there, even though they're at tier 2. It just shows how winning is a big deal no matter what level you're at. It's also worth pointing out, though, to be fair, considering they only won one of these 5 LANs, they were a team that lost to the champion of the LAN in series play, in the playoffs, in 3 of the other 4. So you could make a case that there's a world in which they were the second best team at 3 of the LANs, and then they won one of the others, and then the last one was just a semi-final. So I actually think they're more promising than even the results show, and the results are pretty legit, pretty solid, right? Even though there's not a lot of big championships in there. So then let's come to the map pool of this team. So they're playing all 7 maps, so immediately, mad respect, because I love when teams can do that. It shows actually that the tactical in-game leader has a sense for the game and an understanding of roles and opponents, which mean at the very least on his 7th and 6th map, he can have his team up to speed, he can have a little bit of practice there, he figured out a few aspects, few TCT positions, few tactics, and he's at least got it in his bag for if he needs to reach in there and fuck with someone in a veto. I love that as an approach in the game generally. So in terms of their map pool, I'm going to do my usual thing where I tell you the stats, but I kind of rank the maps overall. So I would say their best map is the map that actually they've won the most times during this time period, which is Train. They've won 5 out of 6 over these last 5 LANs, and their only loss was to Forz. And by the way, that map is statistically Forz's best map over the last 3 months. And they also managed to beat Renegades most recently, who had that crazy form. So that's a pretty legit run of form, I think, overall. Then I would personally rank Overpass, because the 4-0 record, not only are there 0 losses, but look at the teams they beat. They beat MIBR, always played Overpass. They beat Forza, okay, good team, but maybe not the best Overpass team. They beat Furia, a team that you obviously know quite a lot of about the last few months, and they beat North, a team that's been flexing into Overpass a lot over the last year. So these are pretty legit wins. Like, these are teams that are supposed to be better than Tricked/Mad Lions. Then we'll go with Vertigo, which they only played 4 times, but they only lost once. Their wins, they beat Crazy, they beat Force. Their loss was to North, and that was a rare Kirby big game. So you're seeing the actual context is making these results better than they look in terms of just the stats. Dust 2, they've played 8 times, they won 5 times, including wins over MIBR, Crazy, Heroic, so nice big scalps. Nuke, they're 4-3, so doesn't seem as great, right? Until you find out that one of the wins was against Mouse Sports. The team is now one of the best in the world. Even Mirage, their 6th map in this setting, which they're only 2-2. They have a winning record on 5 maps and a losing record on 1 map. They are 2-2 on Mirage, and I actually think their record's slightly better, worse than they probably are, because the one of the 2 losses was an overtime loss to Mouse Sports, the aforementioned decider of that V4 group stage best of 3 series. Then their last map, the 7th map, is Inferno, which they played 3 times and they've won once. So you can see, man alive, this map pool is wide and there's a decent amount of depth there, and look at how spread out the scalps are of the bigger names. So this is legit. They're a tactical team, as you'd expect from London. They have executes. People are in the roles that make the most sense for them. In fact, as Hawker pointed out in a video he did recently on his channel, they even started throwing in contact players. So they've actually got some versatility, some diversity. They're not just a playbook team even. Now, in terms of the players here, the talent, I think it's crazy that they've managed to find 3 talents who all seem like they have legit potential and are starting to do big things now, like these last few months. Like, not like one does one game, one does the other. They're all starting to get going. Admittedly, yeah, it's usually against tier 2, but they've also had the odd match against teams that would rank into tier 1 or occasionally be top 10 teams. So this just again proves how good Hunden's scouting is, because all 3 of these names were nobodies or were nowhere 2 years ago. And it wasn't until, quite frankly, the latter half of last year, 2019, that they started to show some of this, which is when they were already in Hunden's teams. Because, listen, the name I knew, most obviously, aside from Hunden, is Bobski. Now, he was in Fragsters, who I saw make only top 8 at one of the weakest Star Series Season 6, at the end of 2018, the one that was won by I think it was won by Ents, right? And it was over Vega Squadron, and there was a whole bunch of better teams than them there. But Fractus had, I think they 3-0 the Swiss systems. Everyone thought they were going to do big things. They did fuck all. Well, who were the big names in that team? They had Refresh. They had some other names you've heard of. Bobski was just a player at that point in time. He wasn't anything special. You wouldn't think he would be what he's become now. Then you look at Acor and Roj, or Roy, I'll call him because I heard people call him that. Okay, they were players in Copenhagen Flames a while back. Okay, no one even remembers that team except that their logo just weren't they the ones that it looked like a rip-off of the fucking ECS logo? That's about all we know about that team. So you got to ask yourself, where were North and where were Heroic in scouting these players? That's only mildly unfair, because to be fair, Acor was in North Academy a few years back and they had to shut the academy down. But why didn't they keep track of him, what he was doing? Because what does North need right now? Listen, MSL, you are not a star AWPer. They need a good AWPer, right? They kept on like the corpse of Yugi for a year extra while he was playing Casper the fucking Friendly Ghost in the game. Dead half the time, just watching through black and white. So, Acor is an AWPer. So how they didn't keep track of some of these players and get them before a team like not only Tricked had them, but then became Mad Lions and they're no longer available. I don't know what the fuck these people are doing, because at the same time, the Norths and Heroics of the world were just constantly recycling players or fielding the previous generation that, quite frankly, didn't make it, that failed to live up to expectations. The Gade, Yugi, Nico, these players, like, they just haven't made it in a way that actually even these players look like they're about to get to that level now in terms of the last few years of form. Now, the most legit of the three, in my opinion, in this order, are Acor and Bobski. Acor's the AWPer. He seems like the player who's the most reliable one to me. Bobski seems like he has nice all-round games, some decent skills. Certainly seems like he's a very bold individual as well, probably helping in terms of the personality. Beyond that, I'll talk a little bit later about Roy. Hunden is obviously the main central piece in terms of, if it wasn't for him, I don't think you get this group of talent together. I don't think they play as well. I don't think they look as poised and decisive. So he's a good in-game leader. You cannot deny that. But he's a seemingly great scout of talent. Problem is, his big downside is you still have to be able to play Counter-Strike yourself, and individually, he is a terrible individual player. Like, legit, his stats are appalling. Like, I looked up a couple just for reference for you. So remember, 36 maps of play was this time span with this lineup. Now, over those 36 maps on LAN, Hunden averages just under 9 rifle kills, so any of the big rifles, per map. That's fucking insanely bad. Now, over that span, this isn't per map, this is in total, he had 22 USP kills in 36 maps on LAN and 12 Glock kills. Just individually, he cannot cut it. Like, he actually can't even cut it at the level he's at, Tier 2 or Tier 3. At Tier 1, he will get chewed up and eaten alive. Now, he knows how to use himself, like a lot of the good in-game leaders in Denmark. He's something of a space creator. You could tie him into a little bit of what Karrigan does on certain maps. But he's clearly going to be a bottleneck individually for this team, even though he tactically is the only reason they've gotten to this position. So it's a dilemma in that sense. Because when you have a player who's as bad as fragging as he is and will lose as many duels, you put huge pressure on those young potential stars to have to be stars and have to basically be Tier 1 already. That's the reason why Tricked rarely, yes, they're losing a lot of close series. They don't often smash people. Even when they 2-0 people, it'll often be close. And this is one of the reasons why they don't have the fragging differential in terms of what Hunden brings as a negative. So it's like when you had Simple Electronic and Na'Vi, but then Zeus would be such a negative at the Tier 1, in fact, hyper Tier 1 at that point in time, that it would mean you'd still only win closely. So personally, I think with Hunden, you're never going to cut him. That would be a terrible idea. You keep him for now. You start testing out which ones of the players are legit. But he should surely have a future as a coach. Seemingly very good at that. A scout. He's one of the best scouts we've seemingly ever seen in CSGO. Talent development, taking people, figuring out what they need, how to put them in the right positions. If you look at what happened with Bort from his team in Heroic now, that guy looks completely lost. When he was in Hunden's team, he looked like one of the best potential talents coming up. Another role could be general manager. Pick the players that come in. You decide the team. You decide which players we get and which we get rid of. I could see him being great in all these roles if he's ready to step aside. In terms of the fourth player I haven't mentioned, I'm not hating on him. It's a player called Shush, again, spelt in an unusual way because he's Danish. I'm not hating on him. I just don't think he has like the star potential like the other three do. To be fair, when I watch some of their games, it does seem as though he's often in an entry role. But you know what? It's not like he's the only one. I told you the ones I think are the most legit. Like even the Roy guy, I think can be questionable at times. It's just that he leveled up in the last few months. Is starting to look pretty sharp actually. All of them generally haven't really played at Tier 1. And actually Roy is fairly inexperienced even for Tier 2. So the fact that this team's already gotten to where they are is a massive credit to Hunden. I do think eventually though, both individually and just in the sense that you have to take individual factors into the overall IGL picture. You will need a better in-game leader eventually, in my opinion, if you want to go much further. So that's why I actually find the idea that it's been reported there'll be a B-side team pretty exciting because they've got a chance to bring in real talent with the commitment that you have to make to be in that league. And also, they won't have the issues that teams like this had in the past, because this is not the old world. There isn't a North or Heroic who can just steal their talent, who they'll instantly say yes to. The best Danish talent right now is either in Astralis, who have a luxury, like a ridiculous amount of what should be the number one players for any team, or they're outside of Denmark. You have Valdane OG, you have Carrigan leading Mouse Sports, you have Blame F over in Complexity. The other big names aren't even available to the Heroics and North. So Heroic and North, I've showed greedily, they're like fucking Sauron when he's searching for the ring. They're seeking it everywhere. They desire it. Like, but there's no fucking ring race to go get it for them, because in this scenario, North doesn't have more money than Mad Lions, because Mad Lions, I know they're a Spanish brand, but they are basically Splice. They bought them out. So as a result, they don't need to sell anyone. And they can spend money and bring in some talent to this team if they want, especially because of that whole issue in BSEC, which I'll make a video about soon, where you get fined every month $100,000 if you're not in the top 20 of whatever ranking system we'll use. Won't be ours. It will be made in conjunction with either HLTV or the CSPPA. And there's a $2 million buy-in. So when you buy in, you're not buying in to then just let your lineup go to rot completely. You're buying in with the option, with the vision that, like, I've spent $2 million, I might have to spend more every month, so I'm going to get the talent in my team eventually. Now, luckily, I don't think this team needs to right now. I think you can test it out for a few months. So the coolest thing about Mad Lions, in my opinion, is they legit could be the saviors of Danish Counter-Strike outside of Astralis. It's been years since North was consistently anything close to a top 5 team. You can look at Mad Lions now and say they're the second best team in Denmark already. I think they could potentially in a few months be a top 10 team in the world if they get over some of the finals issues and they keep figuring out in terms of consistency of performance from people like Roy, people like Shush. Don't have any fear if they go to land, then we'll see something big from them. The Hunden angle's going to hold you back, but then again, Acor could get better. That's the thing. I'm just looking for one player to develop a little bit further or make his performance a little bit more consistent, and now you'll see them break into a position where they could do something meaningful at the big lands. This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Blunt Smoking Anus Destroyer, Dane Cuskley, Dean Tanglis, Chi Mao, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, Peter the Feeder, Tobias Bernasconi, and a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion and Mohammed, Alabdul, Razzaq. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you'd like to ask me a question in my monthly Patreon AMA. Would you like teasers on upcoming content that I'm doing? Maybe you want to take part in a discussion directly with me? Well, if so, then put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description below.